I've really lost my own vocabulary around emotions. I really struggled to come up with words to describe emotions, and it was quite interesting to kind of realise that and try and confront that and try and sort of relabel, re-establish that conversation around emotions.
Did you enjoy IATEFL?
Yes,
I did too.
It was really nice to see everyone again and
Yeah.
to be back in a shared space.
Mm.
And yeah, with a lovely setting as well on the river.
Oh, Belfast.
Yes.
Yes. So, remember when we were looking through the conference programme, we were going like, what's coming up this year? It seemed to me there was a lot of talks to do with the environment. That was one of the main themes I noticed. I didn't actually go to those ones.
No, me neither. I seem to concentrate more on things surrounding empathy and support and looking after people. There seemed to be a lot on, possibly because of what's happened over the last couple of years, but a lot about, I guess, the softer skills.
Teacher well-being side of things.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of positive psychology and empathy and support and sharing feelings, emotions. It's pretty much.
Yeah. You went to the Sarah Mercer talk, didn't you?
Yes. Yes, the thing that I can remember from that is that I've really lost my own vocabulary around emotions. I really struggled to come up with words to describe emotions, and it was quite interesting to kind of realise that and try and confront that and try and sort of relabel, re-establish that conversation around emotions, which is something that I don't necessarily do in my practice explicitly.
Yeah. And it's funny, isn't it? Because now that's translated back here, hasn't it? We had a TD yesterday, which was all about trainer well-being in essence.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Were there any talks for you that stood out? That you went to a few that were about that kind of thing as well, like supporting trainees, supporting teachers.
Yeah, I don't think there were any on that theme that stood out, but I do think I watched the other day online actually, because you can watch the plenaries online. And I watched the one by Gabriel Diaz-Majoli on reading.
Oh, yeah.
And I just thought it was a really good talk. I mean, he's a great speaker. And he was asking us to maybe question some of our everyday practices on teaching reading and what we do and why we do it, and presented a couple of alternatives.
Okay, that's great, because there's been a lot about readdressing listening and the way that we develop listening skills in learners, but less about reading. So it's nice that that's shifting to make it to make us challenge our approaches in terms of both skills, not just listening.
Yeah, and the importance of like the extensive side of reading and the meaning building side of reading, and how that can actually be realised in a class, as opposed to kind of, the classic testing questions. So yeah, that's worth a watch.
Okay, practical ideas as well.
Practical ideas.
Lovely. Love a practical idea.
Okay. So Jo,
Hi.
you did a talk at IATEFL in Belfast recently.
I did. It was called Just Be Funny, helping trainee teachers develop rapport and engagement. And it was basically just presenting some of the practical things I've been doing on recent initial teacher training courses with trainee teachers to help them really sort of interact and care about their learners and try and move the focus away from the paperwork and the stress of language analysis to focus more on the students that are in the room and the kind of the information and not just the language, but I guess the love that the students are giving these teachers.
Yes.
And using that as a means to highlight their progression through the course. So I did things like we created criteria for creating a positive environment for students and how that might look like, what trainees might need to do, and then they, at the end of each lesson that they taught, they would reflect on which things they were able to do, which things they concretely did in the lesson, which things they would like to do more, both from the point of view of the teacher but also the observers in the room. We did lots of information gathering on the students that was driven by those trainee teachers, and they would put it all together into a kind of shared database so they could consistently reuse that information that they were learning. We incorporated a lot of unassessed practice where the trainees didn't have the burden of assessment, paperwork. They could just hang out with the students a little bit and get to know them. And I mean, certainly with the training teachers that I've done all this with, they've really sort of flown in terms of rapport and engagement and really caring about the students. I think that was the big.
So much so that they're still teaching them now,
They
right?
are still teaching them now, yes, and there's almost too much demand for the teaching to continue. So we'll have to think about opening up more groups to give them that kind of volunteer experience.
Yeah, it's really rather incredible. When you think about it.
It's worked very nicely.
I think it's quite an interesting talk, just on the grounds that there's a lot of talks at these conferences like IATEFL on training issues, but I haven't ever come across one that is trying to help trainees develop rapport. Something that is just assumed.
Yeah, and it's often treated as something you've got, you either have it or you don't have it, like a personality-based thing, which I don't think is the case.
No, not at all. It took me ages to develop rapport.
And then, of course, you did a talk the next day.
I did.
With our colleague Ree.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that was fun. It was quite niche. It was also on a training area, and the area was lesson planning. So I suppose the starting point for our talk was, mostly on courses, pre-service courses. Trainees are doing the lesson planning at home on their own, and we wanted to be able to teach them strategies to lesson plan more effectively, more efficiently and more confidently, rather than them struggling to do it all by themselves alone, and each lesson plan in a sense being a different form of a test. So it's developing that independence and autonomy and confidence in various lesson planning skills.
And you gave the audience again some practical ideas as well, didn't you? You had a couple of examples in there.
Yeah, I mean, it was actually a workshop rather than talk as well, but yeah, so we all got to role play in the workshop through a kind of typical strategy. I think the one we did in the workshop was, on fleshing out one activity and how you're going to manage that activity, and what you might focus on in feedback and what the learners might struggle with in terms of the task. Yeah, so a series of steps that a trainee and their critical friend go through in order to achieve that. Yeah.
And what I really liked about attending that talk was that it was interactive, and we did quite a lot of pair work, and the final task that we got to do was to develop our own strategy that we could help trainees with. And it was really interesting to really sort of hone in on one element of teaching and think about the thought process that goes into that one point of teaching, which again, when you're doing lots of training courses, when you're being a trainer on lots of training courses, you just kind of go, oh come on, just improve your instructions.
Yes.
But you never actually think about what tiny micro steps are involved in those instructions, and so to pare it back to those real basics of try it, reflect on it, write a script, eliminate words from the script, try it again, that kind of strategy, getting us to think what is that strategy is really eye-opening.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, it is a funny thing, isn't it? Because obviously being experienced teachers, but also being experienced trainers, you know, you just do it. And one of the things to start developing these kinds of strategies, you really had to sort of sit yourself down and go, how did I get to the point where I could just do it? You know, what was I doing initially? Yeah.
Definitely. So yeah, I think it was a really, really valuable session.
Oh,
Thank you for the training.
Thank you, that was yours.
You're welcome.